Shalom, shalom, with the real Hebrew Israelites coming in week out to prophesy the downfall of this current kingdom. I want to give all honor, praise, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakadash, double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, that rule well, and to the brothers that's preaching this word with truth and sincerity and charity, and risking their lives to do so. And to the few sisters that's listening, learning, and watching. This is the brother Canasula from GMS Chicago. And yeah, so Creepy Joe won the election. Of course. He's in the office. Nothing happened. You know what I'm saying? The 50 capitals. Nothing yet, but let's see. Because a lot of Jakes, which is the Hebrew Israelites, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, and Seminole Indians, they've been pacified, going back into a deeper sleep, a sunken place, just going deeper and deeper into the void. This Deuteronomy 17:15, thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee, whom Yahweh thy power shall choose. One from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee. Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. Creepy Joe is not your brother. If you see my other videos from the past, I brought this out quite a few times. Description. He is not your brethren. Trump wasn't your brethren. None of them people are your brother, all right? Your true brethren is the ones that's in this truth, man. All right? Who's going out there week in, week out, prophesying the downfall of this current kingdom and hastening it in the day of the coming of our Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai. Y'all just went back to sleep even deeper. All right? You got to think about it. When Creepy Joe was vice president and Obama was president, what did they do? What did they do for our people? Nothing. Y'all totally forgot about that because Trump and the shit show. All right? You forget that Creepy Joe was involved with the 3-strike rule. All right? Period. He's involved in a lot of stuff, and I'm going to play a video for you a little bit. This song's 55 and 21. Because I saw the inauguration. And I know you niggas fell for it. For everything he said. And you can say, well, he signed the executive orders of doing this and do that. Okay. So is this going to make it better for you in the position you're in, or make it worse? Don't forget about what happened back in 2008. It was really rough. And who was in office at the time? All right. And then he got this whole first 100 days, you know what I'm saying, with the cooties, the 19, you know what I'm saying, that whole thing is going to be goodbye to your rights, man. More of your rights, so-called rights, because you never had that in the beginning anyway. When them people was dying, by the hand. Our people was dying by the hands of the cops. When Obama was in office, what did he do? Y'all gotta wake up and realize none of these politicians is for you. So why you trying to get? Why are you trying to ask for their help? Check this out. Psalms 55:21. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart, and his words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. And that's how the inauguration was, when he did his speech. All right. This is Isaiah 31:1. Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help and stay on horses and trust in chariots, because they are many, and horsemen, because they are very strong. But they look not unto the Holy One of Israel, neither seek Yahweh Shem Yahushua. Y'all rather seek the enemy than go to Yahweh Shem Yahushua. You'd rather go to the one who enslaved you this whole time. That's who you would rather go to. What kind of madness is that? Who still got you in slavery? Let's watch this video.
I have concluded that this battle for the Democratic nomination will not be successful.
Now, I'm gonna tell you something. Don't forget what you can look this up. What Kamala, what she was doing, what she was saying about Creepy Joe before she was selected to be his right hand. Before Creepy Joe selected her to be his right hand, what she was saying about him, and all of a sudden it just all changed like that. If you really against a person, why would you join them? And I don't want to hear no, well, she could probably change things from the inside or this or that. No. No. Come on, let's be real.
It's official. This November, Joe Biden and Donald Trump will face off to determine who's going to be the next president of the United States. If you're a left-leaning voter like me, then choosing between candidates is usually pretty easy. If the name has a D next to it, you vote for them. Even if you don't know a single thing about the candidate in question, Democrats are generally better than Republicans. Take one look at the presidential candidates' platforms and the rules seems to hold true. Joe Biden outflanks Donald Trump to his left on every issue. Despite running as the candidate who will return the country to normal, his platform is the most progressive in history. For anyone who cares about healthcare, poverty, the environment, criminal justice, or people in general, the choice is clear. But here's the thing. I'm not dumb. You're not dumb. Comparing platforms is probably the laziest way to distinguish among candidates, because politicians lie a lot.
Develops weapons of mass destruction.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
Because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Instead of looking at the carefully crafted list of platforms rubber-stamped by political operatives, a better way to know who candidates are is their record. And that paints a whole different story. Both Joe Biden and Donald Trump have dealt with a catastrophic economic crisis during their time. In 2008, the housing market crash led to a global recession, the likes of which we hadn't seen since the 1930s. And in 2020, well, you don't need me to tell you about what's going on now. In response to the recession in 2008, Team Obama spent trillions trying to stimulate an economy that had gone stale, but the bill was ineffective. A disproportionate amount of the money went to bailing out the banks, who were criminally liable for getting us into the recession in the first place, instead of into the hands of the millions of Americans that had lost their jobs and homes. This meant a lot of the money wasn't stimulating the economy as promised. Secondly, the bill was simply too small. The White House was far too shy about spending the money they needed to save the economy, and because of this, recovery lagged years and years after the collapse. The bill wasn't authored by Biden. Instead, he took on the role of the behind-the-scenes implementer of the recovery bill. Lovingly titled Sheriff Joe, he made sure no dollar went misspent, and he did a pretty good job at that. Only about 0.5% of the funds went to fraud or were misused, which would be a good thing, except the country was dealing with a crisis a century in the making, and the government needed to spend lots of money very quickly. Biden slowed down a response that was already too small, all in the name of fiscal discipline. This was nothing new for Joe Biden, as he's been closer to conservatives than progressives on the topic of government spending ever since he became a politician. By the 1980s, Biden called himself a fiscal conservative, and when Reagan entered the White House in 1981, Biden stood right alongside the conservative president, voting for every tax cut and bill that cut government aid to essential programs. Sometimes Biden outdid Reagan, like in 1983, when the president proposed a budget freeze to cut the increasing deficit that his own tax cuts had helped create. Biden thought that he could one-up him, and along with 2 Republican senators, proposed an even more conservative freeze that included tax to Medicaid and Social Security. But that was in the 80s. We don't have to go so far to uncover his conservative escapades. In 2010, the country was still recovering from the crisis. Biden served as Obama's chief negotiator when striking a tax deal in Congress. And in December of that year, they reached an agreement. They extended former President Bush's tax cuts on top of passing a flurry of other tax cuts worth billions of dollars. House Democrats, even conservative ones like House Whip Steny Hoyer, all opposed extending the tax cuts. Biden had to resort to outright lying to his party to get this version of the bill on the floor. Allegedly, he didn't mention the tax cuts were on the table when briefing Democratic leaders. Senator Bernie Sanders famously gave an 8.5-hour filibuster to stop it from passing.
Exactly why? But I am in opposition to this.
But eventually, enough Democrats gave in and voted yes. In the debt negotiations that followed, Biden continuously suggested cutting funding for Medicare, Social Security, retirement funds, and even food stamps, despite the disapproval of his Democratic colleagues. Outside of the context of a crisis, Biden is in lockstep with Republicans on economic issues. And within the context of a crisis, he's potentially worse. Let's do a thought exercise for a second. If he was currently the president, would his response really be any different to Donald Trump's? Judging by his history, not really. We'd still get trillions of dollars in bailout money to corporations and meager offerings to working people, except under a Biden presidency, we probably wouldn't even be receiving our $1,200 stimulus checks. Instead, Biden would have likely chosen the side of Democratic leaders like Nancy Pelosi, who opposed the Republican proposal because it gave too much money to too many people. His website suggests he'd take the means-tested approach where only small segments of the country get relief, never mentioning direct payment without adding where needed right after, which in the world of politics would mean only very few people would get support and they'd have to climb a million bureaucratic hurdles to get it. Biden also showed he was willing to endanger the lives of voters to score political victory during a crisis. Before the Wisconsin primary in April, Biden told voters going to vote in person was perfectly safe, despite experts everywhere warning about the danger of doing so during a health crisis. Not a good look, Joe. Shifting gears a bit, there's a reason the Democrat starling Barack Obama waited until the race was over to endorse Joe Biden. He's a conservative. The reason he was on the Obama ticket in the first place was so Democratic voters would have a white, non-threatening face when voting for the first black president in history. It was a wink and a nod that nothing is going to fundamentally change. The sitting VP to the first black president joined politics by opposing the civil rights movement. He fought with Jesse Helms to undo the desegregation efforts won on the back of black Americans.
But it seems to me you must recognize as well the hard truth of our condition. The bitter but honest truth is that for a decade, our cause has been stalling. And we all know in our hearts that we've made some mistakes. For when our priorities were access, accommodation, education, and voting, we triumphed. All America stood with us. However, in the last decade, we allowed the agenda to drift from these goals. Busing and quotas became the priorities.
He didn't only wage war against black Americans on the school ground, he also waged war by locking them up in the war on drugs. He voted to expand criminally disastrous policies, from eliminating parole to harsh mandatory minimums and sentencing disparities for crack and coke. Biden authored many of the premier war on drug bills that constituted the mass incarceration effort.
Now, if he did that when it comes to, the war on drugs, how much more he'd do being the president, with this pandemic going on. Think about that. Scripture says never trust your enemy. Ever. So with that, hopefully this is edifying. Want to give all honor, praise, and glory to Yahweh, B'Shem Yahushai, B'Shem V'Kal the rounders to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. They rule well. To the brothers that's preaching this word with truth and sincerity and charity and risking their lives to do so. And a few sisters that's listen, learn, and watching. To y'all say shalom in the Bible.